Meeting to order. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting. First order is we need election of a temporary chairperson.
I'll nominate Ted. Second.
All right, we have a second. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And we also need to appoint a recording clerk. I would second.
I missed that.
Steve, just did it. Okay. Any discussion? All in favor of Steve as recording clerk, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Annual Voluntary Service to Education Award. Mr. Woods.
All right, this time could I have Mrs. Sarah Banks come on forward? All right, do we need to stand in front of you?
Absolutely.
You didn't know that was all part of it. So, okay, so on an annual basis, the school board in the East Troy Community School District nominates an individual that's an outstanding volunteer service award. And as we kind of talked about some of our candidates or individuals within our community, you were one of the ones that came to the top of my mind for receiving this award or recognition. If I were to ask your family, and it's Isabel, Claire, and David, right? Isabel, what do you think your mom is probably most famous for at Prairie View? Now I'm putting you on the spot. What do you think might be the most famous thing that she does at her school on a monthly basis?
Good birthdays.
Birthdays, and what does that include?
Ice
Ice cream. Okay, so Sarah.
Ice cream lady.
So yes, on a monthly basis, she's the ice cream lady at Prairie View, but there's so much more than that. You've been an active participant in our PTO for several years, many years, and really just a strong, good ambassador of our school as well too. So we know that in order to raise students in a good, healthy environment, it takes a village. And certainly you're an important part of that village. So we want to thank you for that. We also want to thank your family back there too, because mom's got to go to meetings once in a while, or she comes to school, and she's just involved in a lot of different things. So beyond just the ice cream lady too, helping out with math tutoring in 4th grade last year, and maybe some 5th grade as well too. Okay, we'll just stick to 4th grade. All right, so tutoring, but just really helpful and throughout the building. So.
Nothing about the shoes. I thought it was all
Well,
about the
yeah,
shoes.
there's some shoes too, like donations of shoes awards. So all of that goes in there. So on behalf of the school district, I want to say thank you very much for all of your dedication.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Next item is District Administrator's Report, State of the District.
Congratulations, Sarah.
Thank you.
You bet. First of all, thank you, you guys. It's a little different this year. I got my reading glasses, so you're going to see me go up and down a lot. I apologize, but that comes with age, I guess. Somebody said it comes with wisdom. I should have had it maybe a long time ago. No, I'm joking. All right. A couple things first and foremost, and that is I want to thank the board, and I mean that. You guys have a very difficult job each and every year. But to continue always keeping your focus on what's best for the district and students is not always easy when you're facing other challenges in our district. And I know all of those challenges because I'm with you on that, giving you recommendations, but you guys are the ones that have to make the decisions. So I want to say first and foremost, thank you for that, because that is not an easy task by any means. It's easy to lose sight of focusing on what's best for the district and the kids when faced with numerous challenges. So I appreciate that. Secondly, I want to say I'm entering my 13th year as a superintendent of East Troy Community School District, and I can state this for a fact, and that is the tenure of superintendents in the East Troy in Wisconsin is much less than 13 years. Nationally is much less than Wisconsin. And so my point is this, and that is, it's my pleasure serving for all of you, past members and current members, and I truly mean that. I love what I do. I love the people I work with, the administrators that are here, the supervisors, the teachers, support staff, the volunteers, the whole community. I love it. But it really, the key for me is serving at your guys' pleasure and how you guys provide that leadership for the district. So I really, truly mean that. Thank you so much. It makes the 13 years all that much worthwhile. Secondly, let's get on with business, and that is I'd like to focus on, I'm not going to spend a large amount of time. If you want to have questions later or you want to ask questions later, please feel free to do so after the annual meeting or call me up personally. But I would like to go over a few things to help people understand where we're at as a district, what we're trying to accomplish, why we're trying to accomplish that, and then where we're going. So I think those things are really important, and the more that we can help people to understand that, the better position I think East Troy will be at in the future. A few things that I want to point out. In the front of your packet, in my letter to the community, and it's very front of the annual booklet, is my letter. And I'm not going to read it verbatim, but I think there are a few key points in there that are essential toward understanding where we're at as a district. In the very first paragraph, it talks about empower and engage students in their learning. Empower and engage students in their learning. Let me state this very clearly. The East Troy Community School District is trying to personalize education by empowering students. And what I mean by that is we're moving away from an educator-driven where it's personalized to the learner. We're trying to have it be personalized by the learner. And that's really big. I know that seems small in verbiage, but it's really big in the learning environment. Instead of having something be personalized to the learner, meaning it's educator-driven, we're trying to have it be personalized by the learner, meaning that we're involving our students more in their learning. And what I mean by that is it's not just regurgitation of content. My learning experiences were very good throughout my entire educational career. I'm still learning a ton. But I can say that a majority of my learning experiences was an instructor telling me information, right? They were talking to me. And then I was regurgitating it. I was trying to memorize it. Not a bad thing. Do not get me wrong. But was I heavily empowered? Was I working on self-reflective practices? Was I working on goal setting? No, I was not. I was not developing those experiences. And I think it's really important that we work with our students to develop those experiences so they understand when they're facing adversity, when they're not understanding something immediately, that they know how to get where they're going rather than feeling dumbfounded, confused, and not having a path, or relying upon the teacher or the parents to just get them there, because they're not always going to have the teacher or the parents to get them there. They need to rely on themselves too. So when we talk about empowering a child, we're talking about, does a child know what it is they're supposed to be learning in that class? Do they really know it, besides saying, I'm in a world history class, I'm in an algebra class? What is it that you're learning? What is it that you're supposed to learn in this class? You're not just learning algebra. What targets are you learning? Then after that, can the child answer, okay, what is it I know and I don't know? What do I know and what is it that I do not know yet? And that not yet to me is crucial in learning. I think that is absolutely crucial. Learning doesn't stop. And just because you took a test at a certain point doesn't mean it stopped at that test. I can think back to how many tests I have taken throughout my career, and I hope learning did not stop after that test. And to be frank, I think that's part of the issue that we've been having in education for a long time, is that we move on and that learning did stop. Well, what about the child who is not succeeding yet at those learning targets? We just move them on? We need to make sure that our kids are proficient in all of their learning targets. And for the kids that are learning those learning targets, we cannot hold them back while we're trying to help others become proficient in those targets. We need to allow them to have their year of growth too. So I think it's really important to do that. A teacher alone cannot differentiate to those 25, 30 students. That is just a maximum capacity. You cannot differentiate to that degree. So we have to empower our kids to do it. What do I know? What am I supposed to know? What do I not yet know? And then how do I get there? With whose assistance? So meaning, can a child know, understand, select proper tools, seek proper feedback from different venues, welcome errors as opportunities because it's learning. So I'm not saying let's purposely not learn, but I'm not also afraid of not learning, meaning if I err on this, if I make a mistake, it's not the end of the world. I'm going to have to learn that though, and we're going to hold them accountable to that learning. We're not just going to pass you on. We're going to hold you accountable. You're not demonstrating proficiency yet. We need to work on that longer. And then, do they monitor their own learning? Is it the teacher and the parent who's doing all the monitoring of a child's learning? Or is the child actually involved? Not doing it by themselves, but involved in that learning. And here's the deal, folks. Kids don't do that naturally. That does not come naturally. Those are all learned processes. Just like self-reflection. Self-reflection is not natural. It doesn't just happen naturally. It's a learned process. Research proved, learned process. So it's a learned process by having those experiences to do it. So again, here's an example. How many times have we taken a test or a quiz, which I would like to have other things than tests and quizzes. Hopefully we're producing something rather than just consuming. Hopefully we're making something rather than just consuming. But no matter what, if we do a test, a quiz, or we make something, do we have ample opportunity in the learning process to reflect on that too? Instead of just moving on. Do I reflect? What did I learn? What am I not yet understanding? And how am I going to get there? And then I've got to go through those categories, those subcategories. That is just as much about achievement as it is about learning. And to me, both are vital. I've never said that achievement's not important. Achievement's absolutely critical. And achievement at all levels, classroom levels to standardized tests, they're all important. But learning is just as important. And I think one of the big things that we sometimes forget, and I was looking at this today, I did not come up with this. This was a tweet that was out there, but I loved it. And that was the one thing that almost all students develop expertise around in school is how to be successful students. They know how to be very compliant usually. What do I need to do? What do I need to get done? How many points is it worth? What if I'm not getting the point value that I need? How much extra credit maybe will this teacher give me? How do I get the grade I want? How do I get the grade I want? Grades are an important part of life. But I will tell you, we need to reverse the dialogue from how do I get the grade I want to am I learning? Am I learning? Am I learning what I need to learn? I can get the grade I want and not have learned anything in that class hardly. Hard to believe, but that is true. I really believe that can happen. That a child can get a grade they want and not necessarily have learned as much as they should have. Or they're not retaining as much as they should, and they're leaving the class only having retained a certain percentage of work. And I think the difference is, and this is where that tweet was today, and I love it, the one thing all students need to develop expertise around in school is how to become successful learners. We're not trying to make students successful in school. That's not our goal. Our goal is to make students successful at learning. And I am a firm believer, if students are successful at learning, they will ultimately be successful in school. But they will have gotten a lot more education for being successful in learning than successful in school. And those are the kids I want walking across our graduation stage, and when I shake their hands, I'm gonna feel much more confident whatever their career path is, whether it be college readiness or career readiness, that if they're a learner, they're gonna be having success. But if they only were a successful student, they might not be guaranteed success. And I think that's a really important factor. So I want to really point that out. A couple other things that I would love for everybody to understand is, and that is, schools are so much more than a standardized test score. We've talked a lot in our district about standardized test scores, and we need to recognize the importance of them. We need to always keep them at the forefront, but they're one component, one source, right? If you look at all these celebrations up here, we got numerous slides in our packet of celebrations, and I always have to state to our welcome back address it to our staff, please don't get offended that one of your celebrations may not be in the slides. We are so much more than just the few slides that we have up here of celebrations. We could go on and on, but notice in the celebrations the vast array of celebrations we have. Schools are much more than just a test score in a classroom or a standardized score. Those are important, but we have to make sure we're always looking at all the disciplines. All the disciplines. Reading is very important. English is very important. Mathematics is very important. Science is very important. All very important. But just as important are the arts, music, art, everything, drama. Those are just as important. And to some kids, they're absolutely more important. And we need to make sure that we are valuing all of those just as much. So please take time to go through the celebrations. I'm not going to go through them, but I'm very proud of them. I'm proud of the things that we've done on celebrations from financials. I'm very proud of the things that we've done on achievement. I'm very proud of the things that we've done on the learning and focusing on the learner. I'm proud of the programming that we've added in this district. I'm proud of the clubs and athletics that we've done in this district. Now, that being said, do we have other things to still do and get better at? Absolutely. And I can go through those, and I made it. We have many other things that have to continue to get better at. But we have a vast array of celebrations, which makes me proud, because that means we're reaching a vast array of students in our district, and that's vitally crucial. I'm not going to go through these at all. This is 21st century learning, but I will say this slide and the next slide on district goals, we keep these at the forefront of everything. As we are making decisions, not only at budget time in the spring, but as we're making decisions about programming, as we're making decisions about what type of professional development we need to offer to our staff, we are constantly keeping the district's visions and the district goals at the forefront. How does it support that? And here's the answer. If it does not, we do not do it. We slowly start to either remove it or stop doing it, or we don't implement it. It's just that simple. But if it is, then we say, let's do it. Now, oftentimes when we say let's do it, it's not as simple as it's easy. Don't get the two confused. We're saying let's do it, but oftentimes we say this is complicated, this is hard, there's a lot of barriers. So we work on identifying those barriers, and then we find solutions. We find solutions to implementing it. And I think that's critical for our district. Another slide that just reinforces the why. As everybody in this room knows, and we've heard for however long, right? The world is exponentially changing, and it has been. It hasn't changed. I mean, it changed when I was in high school. It changed when I was in college. But I will say, compare the time in which they would compare 5 years when I was in high school to the change in now 5 years. I will tell you, is drastically different what's occurring in those 5 years than the 5 years, 25 years ago. So with that, skills are very important. None of these come as a shock to us. Our own local businesses tell us that these are the key skills that people are they're looking for. So I think it's really important, as we state, are we embedding these skills into our learning experiences? And again, I think it's really easy for a district to get caught up going, we've got to embed creativity into our units. We've got to embed critical thinking into a unit, right? And it becomes overwhelming to an educator and to a teacher and to a student because they're not isolated. You don't go into your workforce area and go, today I work on critical thinking. Tomorrow I work on creativity. You don't show up at your job in isolation. So we need to embed these authentically into our learning experiences for our kids. And to do that means you've got to empower them a little bit. You got to lose control to gain control. And they're going to then begin developing out more of these skills, not in isolation, but in authentic, meaningful connections, which is crucial to their learning. This is a slide I share I've shared now for the last 3 years. I can't say every year, it's 2016. But I think it's a really important one because you know what? It replicates a lot of what's going on in East Troy too. This is not unusual. I think if you go to most districts, this slide would replicate what's going on in education in general. And I think this is what education is trying to deal with. And that is that just because a student is compliant doesn't mean they're engaged. All right, and there's a big difference. So a student could be doing well in a class, but it does not mean they're engaged in the class. A student could be getting good grades in the class, but it doesn't mean they're necessarily learning at high capacity in the class. So I think when you're viewing this, if you're wondering, it's not labeled the greatest. If you're going from the left to right, I believe it starts at, is it 5th grade over there? So 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, 11th, 12th. So if you're going left to right. So it's demonstrating, obviously, where things go from a 5th grader through a 12th grader, which is a very normal progression that we're seeing nationally, locally, statewide, in regards to student engagement and about how students feel about school. So those are things that we're addressing, and we're trying to address in our district. I will not go through the other slides, but if you go through them, you'll see that the other slides that follow this slide is now about East Troy students and what they're telling us. We do a survey every year at 5th, 8th, and 12th. We may start to narrow that in more at every grade, and we will do a lot less, just asking maybe 5 to 10 questions instead of so many. We're starting to believe that we could ask every grade only 10 basic questions and really start getting more information at every grade level. But right now we do 5th, 8th, and 12th, transition years. And our students, no different, nationally, a little better, but obviously not good enough for us on some of these things. Some of these things are very good. You'll notice there's one slide about how much our students believe they have a positive relationship with adults in our buildings. It's very high. It's very high. And we all know the importance of relationships and connections. I am very proud of our staff and all of our leadership in our buildings in regards to how much importance they put on relationships and connections with kids. Because if we don't have positive relationships and connections, we're not going to have anything else going on in the classroom. It has to start with that component that they know we care. And obviously there's the slide right there. I mean, 85, 73, and 90%. And it's always significantly been high, but we're working towards it becoming higher. We addressed a challenge at the Welcome Back breakfast this year in regards to how we can make that even better. I addressed that challenge with all of the staff, and it began on the very first day of school. What we were going to do to welcome our students back and create an excitement so that when they left, they said, this was the most unusual first day of school ever. Instead of hearing often, what do we hear often from kids on the first day of school? Actually, not the first day, the day before the first day. And I guarantee you parents would follow me up on this, I bet you. Most of the times if we'd ask, kids will say, do I even need to go the first day? Because we're just going to hand out resources, or we're going to go over the syllabus, or we're going over the classroom rules. And so I've heard kids say to me, can I skip the first 2 days? Because by the third day we start to actually do something in the room. Okay? And so we flipped the script this year. We flipped it. We said we're going to do some of that, but we're not going to spend a majority of time doing that. We're going to work that in over time. Let's make sure we connect with the kids immediately when they walk in the building and they get out of their parents' car or they get out of their own car. Let's make sure they have a welcome that they've never experienced before in our school. And let's make sure when they come into your classrooms that they have an experience in your classroom that they've never experienced before on the first day. Like, this was totally different. What is going on? And that they go home talking about it rather than, and they go, this was a lot different than what I've ever experienced. And then let's continue to do that. Let's continue to do that because they already think we have a positive relationship with them and positive connections. Let's build it even more. So that was a challenge, and I can say that all of our buildings lived up to the challenge. I know they're having ongoing discussions about how they continue that, but they lived up to it. One of the other bigger discussions we're having right now is, How do we make sure students feel success? How do they make sure they feel success within those first few weeks of school and not fake success? Hey, nice job, you brought your backpack. That's fake success, right? Real, authentic success in the classroom, in each and every classroom. How do they feel that? Because research does show that too. When children have immediate success, they build upon it. They build upon it. But if they have immediately unsuccessful opportunities and times in that classroom, they immediately lose self-confidence. And they're already battling the school year before the school year ever started. So we're working on that a lot. So these are just more ones that I would like everybody to look at in the slides. They're online. All this is posted, so everybody has access to this. But we look at whether or not are our kids communicating and collaborating effectively. Do they feel they are? Do our students feel that they have that school is preparing them to be creative? And do our students feel that school is preparing them to be critical thinkers? Now, to be quite frank, we probably are going to need to define that more often, right? Because that can mean a lot different to a lot of different kids, and we need to get that definition clearly defined so people understand. So what's the rubric that I'm judging this against? So I know, strongly agree to what is creativity. So we need to work on that. But I will say, we are asking and seeking what our students think about their experiences in regards to our C's. Creativity, critical thinking, collaboration, communication, content, and curiosity. We want them all. We want them all. All right, content is very important. Do not get me wrong. It's a heavy part of achievement. If you don't have a knowledge about a certain content, it's really hard to have success about it later, or to be creative about it, or a critical thinker. But it's also really easy to memorize something and never get to creativity or critical thinking. We ask them about classes being interesting, learning experiences being authentic, and the last one, I was provided much opportunity for choice and voice in determining how I represent my learning. Now, some people might wonder, why do you even ask that question? What's the importance of a child having choice and voice? In my time, and I hear that sometimes, in my time, you were told what to do. In my time, you were told what assignment to do. You were told how to do it. And I'm not saying that those things shouldn't happen on occasion. That, you know what, there's just no choice in the matter. This is what we're working on. This is what you're going to do. And this is how you're going to represent whether or not you need to know it. Or how you know it. Totally agree. There are proper times. Just like there are proper times for direct instruction. I have never ever said that there shouldn't be direct instruction. There are absolutely proper times for direct instruction. Just as well as small group and individual work. But the idea is there's a lot more proper times too for having students selecting how they want to represent their learning. How they want to represent it. Everybody's going to work on the same targets. Everybody has to be at a proficient level, but can we not allow our students to show us how they want to represent that learning a little bit more through their voice instead of me determining how they're going to represent it? Why can't they determine it? I just need to know if they understand the targets, right? I need to know, do they know these learning targets? They could be creative in showing me how they know those learning targets. They could relate it back to an interest or passion of theirs instead of my interest or passion. So we want to involve more voice. The other thing about voice that I find really critical is people who study student voice a lot. One of the profound researchers, Russ Quiglia, who's known for studying student voice almost his entire adult life. I find this intriguing. I'm going to make it very simplistic because I don't want to overwhelm people. But he states it very clearly in all of his research. Students who have more voice are 7 times more likely to be motivated. Students who have more voice are 4 times more likely to have positive self-worth. Students who have more voice are 8 times more likely to be engaged in their learning. And students who have more voice are 9 times more likely to understand and have a sense of purpose in their learning. That's crucial. Who in the world would not want those things to be multiplied up? Who would not want students to feel more confident, more engaged, more self-worth, more motivated, more sense of a purpose? We all do. We all want that for our own children. So that is the connection to the voice. It's not just randomly something that we're clicheing onto. It's research proven. What we're working on is how do we involve the student voice? How do we involve it? with that, can we go back to a slide? Sorry, and that's, so what's our purpose? There it is. That one. So this is one that our whole staff continues to work on. Our whole staff, and I'm proud of them. Our leadership teams work on it a lot. Our board works on it a lot. And that is, it's really easy to get caught up in focusing on the next challenge, right? And then you lose sight of what your purpose is because you're on to the next challenge. But then as you're dealing with that challenge, you lost the nexus to your purpose. And trust me when I tell you, that's really simple to do because it happens to me a lot. And I told our staff that at Welcome Back Breakfast, I go, if that makes you feel really uncomfortable about your leader, I'm sorry, but that's me showing my vulnerability to you, which I said it's okay to be vulnerable. Because that's how you learn, by admitting that you don't know everything, and you don't know how things are gonna turn out, but you're gonna work through it with others. And that's why we're all in this together. Well, this is our purpose, folks, and I'll reverse it as questions. Just ask yourself, is it two before all of this? Just ask that, reverse it into a question. And so put, is it two before each and every one of these statements? Is it to select talent? Is that the purpose of education? To sort and select? To be honest, if that is, education's not nearly as complicated or tough as I thought it was. And it's not nearly as much of a science and art as I believe it is. I think every teacher in a classroom, that is a science and an art. That is a gift to have students. When you ensure learning, when you ensure it, and you provide it, and you promote it, and you ensure empowerment, that is a gift. That is an unbelievable gift of an individual that they have that ability. And I guarantee you those people are not selecting talent. They're not sorting talent. Anybody can put grades down, average grades, and give a grade. Anybody can do that. I could probably teach a third or fourth grader to do that averaging. All right? That is not the gift that our teachers have, and that is not what they do. I know that's not what they do. They're doing the first one. They're developing talent. Is it to develop talent? The answer is yes. We're not here to sort and select kids. Sorting and selecting will happen in their lifetime. I'm not here to say it doesn't happen. When we hire people, we're sorting and selecting, right? We're hiring the best candidate, and we're going through a lot. So I know that's the real world. I get it. But we're here to ensure learning. Learning. We're here to ensure achievement. And we're not going to do it by sorting and selecting kids. Sorting and selecting means I'm passing kids on. And no matter if they're ready or not, I'm just letting them go through the system. And I just keep averaging things out. And then I just keep reporting out to their parents whether or not they're getting a grade or not getting a grade and what that grade is. We need to develop their talent. I always said if that was a mission statement, just our mission, develop talent, I wonder how much schools would change completely. Because that would turn school systems over in a heartbeat. If our job was strictly develop talent, that would change everything. Is our purpose to teach students something, or is our purpose to prepare students for anything? I don't think anybody wants their students just to be prepared for something, because that could change tomorrow. I think they want them to develop the skills that prepare them for anything, that they can think through the next problem. That they can think through the next problem, because there might not be a solution yet made for that problem. I also would say, and I didn't say this at the Welcome Back, I don't believe the next person to cure cancer is going to be the person that we're just teaching them something. I think the next person who's got a chance of curing cancer is the person who we're working to help them prepare for anything. Because they're going to need to think outside the box, because we haven't cured it yet. So we're going to need to be working with kids always on that component. Do we want to report learning or develop learners? Big difference. A reporting of a learner, I'm going to be blunt, is somebody who disowns their responsibility. I'm responsible for reporting Stacy's learning out, but I disown whether or not if she's learned. Hey, that was her job, that was her responsibility, and that's her ownership, man. I'm involved in that. If I'm her teacher, if I'm her principal, I'm involved in that. She's got a heavy responsibility to that learning, no doubt about it. And we're not going to let her off the hook either. But we're involved in developing the learners together. I'm not just going to report out her learning. So we can go on and on about that. That's my point. So I think going to our purpose is really critical when we're discussing a policy, when we're discussing a practice, does it support purpose or not? So we can keep going. This one, sorry. This one very quickly. So I already told you that I believe self-reflection is learned, and that's not just me, that is research proven that it's a learned process. The other thing about self-reflection is this, right? If a child believes that if they can understand the potential they have, right, and if a child can understand where they're currently at, their performance, the only way they're going to link the two together is through self-reflection. So if you can get a child to really know what it is they know and do not yet know, and where it is they need to get to, their potential, that's the self-reflection link. That's huge. Because now they're starting to think about, well, how do I get from A to B? How do I get there without going, tell me. We've got them thinking about it. The other thing that the students did, which I found very curious, was we asked them 3 learning methods you would like your teachers to use more often to assist you with your learning. Now notice we're very careful with our verbiage. We didn't say to assist you with your grades, right? Because I've asked that question before, and students will say, like to have my teachers give me more extra credit, right? Like to have more time preparing for the tests, those type of things. We're not focused on the grade. The grade will take care of itself. We're focused on the learning. If the child's not learning, we've got to make sure the kid learns. We've got to make sure of it. So these were responses of the kids. They like more project-based learning. So they want to create. They don't want to just consume. They don't want to be given something to assess. They want to create their assessment. They want to create it. They want to be given more opportunities to demonstrate their learning. So instead of being told how they're going to show their learning, they want to have some voice in that. They also want to have a little more flexibility in when they're demonstrating that learning. I may demonstrate my learning at a different time than Jody. Jody might be more advanced in a certain discipline or a certain unit than me. So Jody might be demonstrating that learning within 2 days. Why should Jody have to wait 2 more weeks while the rest of the class is having to learn it? Why can't he demonstrate it and move on? But should I have to be showing my demonstration of my learning in 2 days just because Jody's there in 2 days? Can't I have a little flexibility in the timeline in which I demonstrate it? Can't be too much, I get it. Can't be forever. I've got to show the teacher, do I get it or don't I? But can I have a little flexibility in that time? Because we have different readiness levels. We've told different readiness levels, especially if it's been shown we have different readiness levels. Because then you're just setting me up. If I have to take the same time as Jody in 2 days, and yet just 2 days ago I showed you I had no understanding of this all, 2 days ago he showed you he had all the background knowledge completely, I can tell you what I'm going to demonstrate to you 2 more days. And I'm sure he could tell you what he's going to demonstrate to you 2 more days. So that's what we're trying to work through. Do we have all the answers? No, we don't, folks. How are we doing that? It's the work that we're doing right now. How? Right? But right now we're trying to also tell people why we're doing it. Continuing on. This is just a thing that it kind of is clear, but what we must do to what learning must become. I don't think it's anything out of the ordinary. I don't think it's anything that most people would say I'm absolutely opposed to a learning environment like that. But I think they're very critical to us making a learner rather than just an achiever. This is by George Kurios. He's a pretty famous author right now who's talking a lot about how schools need to become more innovative. And not innovative like starting new programs, like what's the innovation that we need to start having in schools so kids can become more innovative later on in life. And so he's gone through and looked at a lot of different things. He's saying, do you have these 8 kind of components in a building, in a classroom, in your educational environment? Do you support these things in policy? Because if we're not supporting these things, he would say that we're not setting our kids up to have success. That we're more setting our kids up to be good students, but not good learners. And so I think this is really important. I think we've made a hard push on this, but we have a lot of work to do. This is not natural, folks. This is a little different than the environment we grew up in learning. This is a different environment, the environment I grew up in teaching. I tell the teachers that all the time. It's okay. I was a teacher. I thought I was a pretty darn good teacher. And I can tell you, I was not implementing all these very authentically. I had them, but I didn't do it very well. It's okay. I don't find that, I don't say to myself then, well, you were a bad teacher, Chris. I didn't know about these things when I was teaching. I didn't reflect, I didn't have anybody leading me well enough to think about these things when I was teaching. So times are changing with the research that's changing and what our kids need. Just another really good quote that I always like to talk about with people, and I'm a firm believer of it. So with that being said, look, if you want to go to the next one, yeah. We cannot mandate learning. I'm not trying to tell people we can. I wish we could. We cannot mandate learning. But what I do say is we can really set the conditions, create the conditions to help people feel more inspired to learn, to help people feel more invested to learn, to help people feel more interested in learning. And that doesn't just go for our kids, by the way. Okay? That goes for the adults that are within our educational system. We can create the conditions for our teachers and support staff and our supervisors and our principals and district administration. We can set the conditions and create the conditions that make all of us feel more invested, inspired, and interested to learn. So this is not just something for our kids. This is for all of us, because we all need to be learning like this. All of us do. And so to do that, this is kind of how we're doing it in our district right now. These are the actions that we are taking and that we slowly work on. Now, if you were to quiz me and say, how are you doing that? I could talk about that. I'd probably turn to others in here and say, how are you doing it in your buildings? Because these are the dialogues and conversations they're having in their buildings. Do not think for a second that it is me standing up saying, this is how we do it. No, I wouldn't allow that. What the conversation is, okay, you know the direction of the district. Go back to the professionals, which are the teachers, and let's start talking about how do we do this, right? What are the consistencies and norms that we're going to have within departments and buildings that support our purpose? Could look a little different from the science department to the math department. Could look a little different from the high school to the middle school. But nothing can look different than it does to support a purpose. That's the goal. Moving on. And then at the end, what I have is also, I said it at the beginning, and I'll state it now, achievement is very important. But I do want to state this for the record. I have found now through my 13 years as superintendent and 23 years, 23 years in education, I have found, 24 years, sorry, on the record. I have found that we have, in education, oftentimes value what is being assessed upon us. If that makes sense. Oftentimes we value what's being assessed upon us, meaning we're really not in charge of what we value. Things are being assessed upon us, and then everyone starts valuing that. I think those things are important. Don't get me wrong. I'm not dismissing what things do get assessed upon us. So like standardized test scores, ACT, forward exam, ACT Aspire, those are all standardized scores. I don't dismiss those. Those are important. Those are important. I will say this, there are some universities, which I'm very happy about, that are now having those scores be optional. Optional for admittance. They're saying you don't need to submit it, you don't need to take it. But then we're gonna look at the whole child in regards to these other things. So it's optional. Not every university. I have noticed more and more universities are having more of a range on those standardized scores. And I noticed more and more universities are looking at the whole child. The essays, the recommendations, the leadership, right? All of that. And I'm really happy that universities are really trying to make a push on looking at the whole child rather than defining a child by a score. I am really happy about that. I know that's not easy, because how do you do that for a mass amount of kids who are applying? So I get the hard work behind that. I'm happy the hard work's happening. But with that being said, where I'm going with it is, what I want our district to continue to focus on is, let's assess what we value. So let's not value what's being assessed upon us. Let's instead assess what we value. And I think what we need to value is always the learner hence the school perception surveys, getting our feedback from our kids, the learning process, that there's more to learning than what a kid did on a test, and the achievement, the tests, the quizzes, the products, what they're making. So we need to do all three. We need to make sure we're valuing what, all right? We need to make sure that we assess what we value by focusing on the learner, learning process, and achievement. Not one or the other. And I will say for it, I'm on camera, not one, in my opinion, is more important than the other. They're all important. They're all important. If we really want to have a graduate that walks across the stage and we feel truly is prepared. Feel truly is prepared. So with that, please take a look at all of the other things that we have on there for the student data. There's much more student data. There's other standardized test scores that I'd be more than happy to go over besides the ones we just put up there. There's also some standardized test scores that I'll tell you, flat out, we need to work on. And we don't need to work on because I want to improve test scores for East Troy Community School District. We need to work on the work because we want to show that true achievement is occurring. And I will say, if a standardized test, any standardized test, shows that there might be a question about achievement, we need to address it. We need to address it at any levels, at any grade, in any discipline. We need to address it. Because I will say, that should be a concern of ours. Because even though we might say it's one source or one area, it's still one source in one area, and that's, I want all of our sources to show our kids are achieving at all of the levels and all the disciplines. Does that make sense? So I don't take any one source lightly. And so I promise you, if one source is showing that, we will work toward doing it, but not to raise a test score, but to make sure we're raising our achievement. So the final thing I leave with you before we get to the financial components is this. A lot of people might think that this is a lot of work. And it is, but I really don't think we're doing more work. I think what I ask you is to think about this. We are not trying to do more work. We're trying to do the right work more. We're not trying to do more work. I do not want to put more work on to a professional staff that already devotes their entire life to ensuring and helping kids. That's the last thing I want to do. But what we need to do is support our staff and support our kids towards ensuring we're doing the right work more. And that's really important because we can spend a lot of time being really busy, but not doing the right work more. And so that goes back to that one graph about I can spend a lot of time having kids be compliant, or I can really do the right work more and have my kids be engaged. And that's kind of what we're trying to get to. So thank you, and we'll go over the financial component.
Hey, hi, good evening. My name is Kathy Swergis. I'm the business manager of the East Troy School District, and the first part that I'm going to discuss tonight are the key financial components. The annual meeting tonight, I feel it is like a state of the district address, and Dr. Finger handles the educational component, and I try to fill in with the finances, which obviously need to support what we're doing in the classroom. So a couple of key, again, components that I'd like to explain. Since 1993, schools are funded by what's called a revenue limit. It's basically the main concept of school finance. And it does just what the name implies. It limits the amount of revenue. A revenue limit limits the amount of revenue. And my joke is always that it's not like a speed limit. You cannot go over it, even a little bit, or you face penalties. So, and what a revenue limit then is defined as is property taxes plus state aid. So once this big computation comes out about what our revenue limit is going to be, and it will be finalized mid-October, then how it breaks down is how much of the revenue limit is funded by property taxes and how much of it is funded by state aid. What drives the revenue limit formula is enrollment. So this is a chart, and it can show you a little bit of what we've been dealing with. Basically declining enrollment, like a vast majority of Wisconsin public schools. So In yellow on this slide, you can see where 4K was added. 4K was added in, I think it was about 2005, 2006 school year. And even with the addition of one additional grade, we are at or below about what our enrollment was roughly 18 years ago. So again, declining enrollment. A couple more factors that represent, again, enrollment. Open enrollment has been growing, both open enrollment in, which we consider to be a positive, and open enrollment out, which we consider to be a negative, because for every open enrollment out student, you basically have to pay the other school that they are attending. So you can see that is, you know, one battle that we're always trying to fight is not to increase our open enrollment out. We also have a statistic down there for homeschool kids, and that's fluctuated quite a bit depending upon the year that you're looking at. So again, key financial components. We like to note how, again, our revenues are broken up. So the pie chart on the left is that property taxes, again, one key component of revenue limits, makes up about 62% of that revenue limit formula at East Troy, and 21% is what's called state aid. The gray is also a form of state aid. It's called per pupil aid, and it's relatively new. Started about 3, 4, 5 years ago, and so from the state we're getting about 27% in state aid, and again 62% property taxes. And I did look up annual meeting 11 years ago, just pulled that one out of the drawer. Property taxes comprised 61%, state aid was 34%. So property tax is about the same, but state aid has gone down. So what's grown is that peachy other category. And what is the other category? It could be fees, open enrollment in revenues, grants, gifts, and I'm going to say grants especially are on the increase. You're going to see a slide in the future of all the different grants that we try to take advantage of. We have the safety grant, the Fab Lab grant, AODA, personal device grant, social worker, mental health aid. All of these are additional funds that we apply for and hopefully receive based upon our application. But again, that percentage has grown from that annual report about 11 years ago from 5% to 11%. General fund expenditures are on the right-hand side. General fund being only Fund 10, which you'll see a little bit later on as we go through the funds, that excludes special education. And so I like to show this slide, which is general fund and Fund 27, because that comprises your regular education and your special education staffing. And you can see our salaries are 52% of that total expenditure of, again, Fund 10 and Fund 27. Benefits are 21%, and then the other category is 27%. So, you know, again, I like to look at what's the trend been over time. And looking back, we have been decreasing the percentage in benefits slowly. We were 25% 5 years ago, down to 21% now. We had some decreases in our health insurance renewals, some flat health insurance renewals, frankly, that helped to save us a lot of years in balancing the budget. This year, planning for 1920, I'll just interject right now, was not one of those years. We saw a 16% increase in our health insurance this year. And then, you know, the other point that I'll make about this slide is when it turns to budget balancing time, which will give you a little snippet of what it looks like in this presentation today, but it's one of the reasons why we often have to turn to staffing and all positions throughout the district is because that, again, 73% of our budget is people, it is staff. Here is a snapshot of our mill rate, which mill rate is the amount of taxes per $1,000 of home value. We have a chart that goes across the top that has trended mill rate since 2001, 2002. And then we have a chart on the bottom that shows how we compare to neighboring districts and Rock Valley Conference districts. We pick our neighbors for the geographic comparability, but we also pick the Rock Valley for size comparability. And one thing I'll I'll point out about the top graph is mill rate going down does not necessarily mean taxes are going down. It has a lot to do with this slide. In years where we actually had negative property valuation changes, if you go back to this slide, so that was from 9/10 to about 2015, that's when the mill rate was increasing. Because of, again, the mill rate being taxes per property value, there's a lot of times where you have positive property growth and your mill rate decreases, and then again, when you have negative property growth, then your mill rate can increase. So there's quite a few examples in the PowerPoint of, just some different tax scenarios. The bottom houses right now for the annual meeting is what we are estimating. So I keep the example up on the top because there were some pretty confusing years a few years ago where we were either levying the same amount of money or even decreasing, yet mill rate was going up. So I always like to have that example on here. But the numbers that we're projecting today at the annual meeting are below the yellow line, and so what we're saying is our mill rate last year was $9.21. We are projecting a 2% property valuation increase, and so your $200,000 home would now be $204,000. I know I don't show it on the houses because I'm not smart enough to change that graphic, but I change it over here on the calculation. And then we are projecting a $9.33 mill rate. On a $200,000 home, I believe that is $62 of a tax increase if today's numbers held. Now, this is the first time in about 5 different places in this meeting I'm going to say the numbers are going to change by the time this is actually set at the late October meeting. And that is because we don't have our student count numbers yet. And again, enrollment drives the revenue limit formula. The student count was Friday. We basically spend the late end of this week and early next week running through all those figures. We are corresponding with the districts that are open enrollment in and open enrollment out and checking on, are those kids there? Who did they end up going to? Then October 1st, from the Department of Revenue, we get the final property valuations. So I said we were anticipating 2%. Baird has given me an estimate of 3.3%, but everything's an estimate until we get the final figures October 1st. And then October 15th, we get the final state aid. And the state aid is based on your last year's spending. So right now, we are using conservative estimates in enrollment. We are using conservative estimates in equalization aid to hopefully yield what is a conservative increase at this time in the mill rate and the subsequent levy increases. So what I'm saying is I hope by the time it's all said and done in October, we will actually be less than what we're talking about today. This is just a snapshot of the property taxes. Where do they come from for East Troy School District? So we have 8 municipalities that feed into East Troy. Town of East Troy has the biggest share of the taxation. And so the other thing I want to say is that when we're talking about like a 3.3% levy increase today or a $9 and I lost it, $9 and whatever it was, 33-cent mill rate, that's the average for all the municipalities. And so what ends up happening is one municipality might be a little greater than the average, one municipality a little lower than the average. And then I always give you a couple facts from last year. Last year, we had a 0% overall average levy increase, 0% levy increase. Our 3 biggest municipalities fared as follows. The town of East Troy saw a 1.41% decrease. The town of Troy saw a 2.19% overall increase. And the village of East Troy was a decrease again, 1.83%. So again, it averages out to whatever we're talking about as an overall levy and overall mill rate, but how each, how has the property value changed within each of those different municipalities affects who gets what share of the total pie. Going back to revenue limit, remember again, revenue limit is state aid plus property taxes. what has our revenue limit looked like then over the last few years? I know the numbers get pretty small, but I want to keep 2006 through 2011 up here because we were used to getting around 3 to 4% revenue limit increases. Then Act 10 came in 2011, and the revenue limit took an almost 8% cut, 8% decrease. And then in the period after that, except for the last 2 years, it was about 0 to 2% revenue limit increases. And then 17, 18, and 18, 19 were just slightly higher than 2%. These numbers do include the extra per pupil aid. It excludes transfer of service. Transfer of service is when we take on a service, like we've been having to take on, for example, some Lakeland services. And then if you have to add a staff member, for example, that Lakeland was paying for, that's not apples to apples. We try to stay apples to apples. Graphing those percentages. So the trend again was a 3 to 4%. Average that out. It was the brown bar. Then in 11-12, our actual revenues follow the yellow line there. So what we played with was if you projected out the average increases that school districts saw prior to 2011 versus our revenues now are about what they were in 2011-12, you know, the gap that we've been dealing with in trying to make the budgets balance. This is an important component, but I like to think of it separate from revenue limit because state aid, again, is one component of revenue limit, but very often state aid has been decreasing. And especially in like the 2005-06 to 2013-14 period, even if we didn't increase our budget by 1 penny, when state aid was going down, property taxes were going up. And we had some quite large property tax increases in that time span. Now luckily, if you look from about 12-13 to 18-19, our state aid has even bounced back a little bit, gone up a little bit, and that's again just, you know, people always ask me, what can we do to increase our state aid? We can put more money in the pot in the state aid formula because basically that is what's driving those numbers. Because we have had stable to increasing state aid from the state the last 4 or 5 years, we have been able to keep our property tax levy very flat in the last, again, 4 or 5 years. And the old Prairie View referendum expired in 2015, and then the new Little Prairie referendum debt layered in. So, you know, that's been a very successful look at our property tax history in the last 5 years or so. And now, before I go on to 19-20 numbers in a little bit more detail, we have a slide here that takes a look back at 18-19 and how we ended the 18-19 year. And I'll ask Bob Dignan, our treasurer, if you'd like to add anything. He has a piece of paper on, do you have the page number?
21.
Okay.
If you'd like to refer to page 21, I won't necessarily go through and read this because you can all do that for yourselves. I do want to point out the Treasurer's Report figures for fiscal year 2018-2019 are enclosed in this packet, and the external audit of the budget has been completed, and we will see a final written report coming out here within the next few months. We should have that by December of 2019. We talked a little bit about the revenue numbers. I won't rehash them. Kathy went through them already much more completely than I would. I do want to point out a couple of key highlights that are at the bottom because they are noteworthy. When you look at the highlights from 2018 and 2019, we did have a 0% tax levy increase. Obviously something that's very important to us, trying to remain very, very financially strong and conservative and serve the taxpayers. We were able to refresh a majority of the Chromebooks that students are using on our 4-year cycle, and we did that from reserved funds, reserving $120,000 for the next replacement cycle. With Chester Burns, officially going away this year, we did see I believe it was a $20,000 decrease in operational costs. And then we did make the final payment on the Fund 38 loan repayment. So all in all, it was a very, very good year in light of some continuing trying financial situations as a result of state formulas. But at this point, Kathy, I'll turn it back to you and you can present the budget.
So now we turn to the 1920 figures. And 1920, we have the first year of a biennial budget, which is increasing revenue limit funds by $175 per student, and then the per pupil aid of an $88 increase. With no student growth, so that means when we, again, do a lot of our projections, we try to see, okay, if we project a roll forward method, our student enrollment declines by 25 kids. If we project a flat enrollment, so that's what I'm doing here with no student growth, what does that give us? And we try to use the most conservative methodology, yet realistic methodology. So with no student growth or transfer of service, just by doing the formulas with the additional dollars, this is a 2.35% revenue increase. Every year, we added a couple slides to this annual meeting, and every year we wanted to give you a little look of what we do to balance the budget. Because actually these numbers, let me go back, the $175 per pupil and the $88 per pupil aid. At first we were projecting like only $100 per pupil in aid, then it turned to $200 revenue limit and no per pupil aid. So we had lower projections originally, but when we make those projections, we utilize a forecasting model created by Baird, and it gives us like a 5-year outlook after we put in our assumptions. Again, what do we think revenue might be in the state budget? What kind of health insurance increases do we think we might see? What kind of salary increases? This last year we did the balancing process on 405,000 was what we coined the revenue cap gap. So the difference between what you get in revenue limits and per pupil aid, so any amount of revenue, and then what your expenditures are projected to be. So roughly, 2% revenue, 4% expenditures. And we put it on a sheet of paper and post it, and basically what we're doing is trying to balance the budget. We do have some things called impact needs. Impact needs are adds to the budget. So we're finding we're short-staffed in 5th grade. We really need to add a 5th grade section, or we need to add some programming that is desperately needed to stay competitive with, again, 21st century learning and where that direction is going. When we have years, like I mentioned, the health insurance at 16%, well, in this budget model was an 8% health insurance increase. When 16% happened, that's an additional negative amount that we need to balance. So again, giving you a snapshot of, again, what we go through, and the board wrestles with it every year, basically trying to balance the budget and what different additions and what different subtractions are there going to be, because we basically are not going to be solvent if we start deficit spending. So what have we done over the last, probably since the 1993 revenue limits became enacted? What have we done to balance the budgets? I've been here 10 years now, but I find binders, and they distract me because on occasion I'll start looking at these binders from 1996, and again, same things, reducing retirement benefits, reducing health benefits. So it's been quite a few years of every year basically eliminating a little bit more and more and more. So just another slide on some of the reductions, but more of a consolidation. So instead of just saying, hey, we reduce health insurance benefits, bless you, we have had a 17% reduction in health insurance costs in 7 years. We reduced retirement benefits by $6.3 million over the last 10 years. Or excuse me, post-employment benefits, that was that one, reduced $6.2 million. we've balanced the budget for about 6.3 million over the last 10 years. And again, we take advantage of grants. There are federal grants that we take advantage of. And again, this has really grown in our lives, but there are just a lot of other grants that we are continuously applying for so that we can get as many dollars as we possibly can. Then finally, to wrap it up again, that component of state aid and property taxes. And the graph down below is again to illustrate, even in years where our budget is remaining flat, depending upon how that relationship of taxes and state aid fluctuates, it can be a good tax levy year or a bad tax levy year. And that is something we need to keep an eye on. So besides, going through this annual budget process of just trying to even balance the budget, I want you to know that we can keep an eye on what our state aid is projected to look like for the next year. And do we have to reduce even more besides even balancing the budget, just so that we don't have a large property tax increase? Over on the right-hand side are our numbers this year. So I said the revenue limit was 2.35. Once you add in the transfer of service, we're looking at about a 2.8% increase. State aid is down this year, 3.36%. Again, overall money in the pot, but also we're something called a negative tertiary aid district, and that's a very strange word, very strange phrase, but it basically means we have a high property value per student number in East Troy. We have, if you were to take all the schools in the state of Wisconsin, we have more property value per kid than the average school district. Where that puts us is for every additional dollar that we spend, we actually lose state aid. That's the spectrum that we're on. And last year, we refreshed that Chromebook cycle. So that, for example, we are doing a $400,000 outlay there that we don't have every year. That ends up reducing our state aid. And then our levy, again, conservative numbers, but we are looking at about a 3.3% this year is what is in our documentation. So at this point in time, we turn to the statutorily required budget hearing. And common school districts, which is what we are, must hold by statute this public budget hearing at the time and place of the annual meeting. So that's why we're doing what we're doing tonight, is it's actually state law. So we have a summary of the budget that is being again proposed and again not finalized with the numbers. And I'm gonna stop and say an aside here for the board. I actually looked into this year, if we could push this meeting to like the October meeting, like October 20th. So instead of me saying, oh, we have all these estimates, we could be presenting the actual numbers. There's one glitch right now. We don't have a big enough fund balance where we avoid short-term borrowing. As you're gonna see in the meeting after this, we have to short-term borrow about 2.9 million for cash flow. There's another law that you cannot borrow or do a line of credit until you've had your annual meeting. And we need the funds for cash flow by the end of October. So until again we either get a bigger fund balance such that we can have lesser short-term borrowing, like we can't push our annual meeting later. So I thought that was like a little interesting tidbit you might want to know. So here's where we talk about what are some of the funds in our budget, because on page 29 is a summary of the budget that again we're here to approve tonight, and that you'll have a final version in October in front of you. So there's actually 2 slides here, but we have funds that are numbered 10 through 80. The first block up at the top, the bigger block where it says general fund, that is fund 10. And the best way to describe fund 10, I think, is it's all of the money that's not required to be elsewhere. So if you first go to the other funds and then see what's required to be in those funds, and then go back and say Fund 10 catches everything else, that's how I look at it anyway. So the next skinny block on that page 29 is called Special Projects Funds. That is your 20s, and we have 2 in the 20s that add up to that Special Projects Fund. We have Fund 21 and we have Fund 27. 27 is special education. So anything that by definition ends up being special education related is in Fund 27. Fund 21, we have a lot of clubs in Fund 21. We have like yearbook club is in 21. Trying to think. There's clubs, but they still have advisor input to them. Coaches club. We had sometimes people trying to raise money for like soccer projects. That went into 21. So it was things that were funded by gifts, donations, and then they can carry a balance from year to year. Fund 30, which is the next skinny block, is debt service funds. We now, Mr. Dignan mentioned that we closed Fund 38. We made the last payment on it. We now only have Fund 39, which is the Little Prairie and the high school renovation building debt that we just did. 49 is when you basically pass a referendum and we had 24.7 million to work with. 24.7 million is deposited into Fund 49, and then you're allowed to spend it over 3 years. We have closed that out from that referendum. We no longer have a Fund 49. Next, Fund 50 is food service. So the food service fund is a fiduciary fund that accounts for all the revenues and expenditures associated with food service. Fund 70 is not on here. It's considered to be a trust, and it's not considered to be one of the district funds that is reported in the annual meeting. It is where you hold monies for scholarships. And then Fund 80, the Community Service Fund, is a fund that's established for community-type activities. Daycares could run through there, adult education. So that is where Fund 80 comes. A note on the long-term debt. The only long-term debt that we have anymore, again, is that Little Prairie building. And we are looking to amortize that by March 1st, 2036. And our remaining principal is just over 21 million. And I suppose before we get to the resolutions, the last thing that I'll say, on page 29, you start getting into a couple blocks towards the end where it talks about total expenditures and other financing uses, and then again, the proposed property tax levy. So if you look at that block that says proposed property tax levy, you're gonna see the number that's on this slide for the resolution that we are looking to, again, if my numbers close today, which they don't, we would be having a $15,312,000 levy with a mill rate increase of 1.3%, overall levy increase of 3.33. And you say, why the difference in percentages? Because the property valuation, again, we're estimating is up 2%, so that doesn't mean, if it was a 0%, your mill rate increase and your levy increase would be the same. But with property valuations projected to increase, it lowers your mill rate and it lowers your percentage increase of your mill rate, if that makes sense. So, we can say, are there any questions on the budget? And we can also go into resolutions at this time.
Anybody have any questions on the budget? We'll move into resolutions. First one is the adoption of the tax levy. Anybody like to make a motion?
Mr. Chairman, be it resolved that there be levied a school tax against all taxable property within the district in the sum of $15,312,297 necessary to operate and maintain the school system and to finance the capital outlay and debt service of said system for the 2019-2020 school year, which budget is approved.
Do we have everybody in the district to vote on. So all in favor of the resolution to adopt the tax levy, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Next one, Resolution B. Salaries for Board of Education members.
Mr. Chairperson, may it be resolved that the Board of Education salaries be set at $2,500 for the 1920 school term.
I'll second.
Discussion on the resolution? All in favor of setting the board salaries at $2,500 for the next year, please say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Resolution C, set date and time for the 2020 annual meeting, and it doesn't sound like it can be in October. Would you like to make that motion?
Mr. Chairperson, may it be resolved that the 1920 annual meeting be set for September 28th, 2020 at 6 p.m.
May that be 2021? Yeah.
Oh,
It
thank
should be
you.
2021.
It should be 2021.
Yep.
Thank you.
I'll try it again. Mr. Chairperson, may it be resolved that the 1920 annual meeting be set for September 28th, 2021.
No, it's
No,
2020.
Yeah, because it's 2019.
Yeah.
Wait, it's wrong up there.
Oh,
No, it's not.
Yeah.
It
I would
says
say
here-
there's next year's
We're setting it
meeting
for a
should
year
be
from now.
2021.
oh, 2021, I get it.
Yeah.
I get
Oh,
you.
I'm like,
Yeah,
next
I
year?
get you.
Got it.
20?
I'm like,
Third time is the charm.
Not with us helping you.
May it be resolved that the 2021 annual meeting be set for September 28th, 2020 at 6 p.m. Please second.
I will second that.
All right. Any discussion?
Just one quick question. Kathy, when do you anticipate next year having the final number?
You won't have them till October 15th.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, okay.
Because that's when state aid gets released every year, October 15th.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay. Thank you.
So I would love to have the annual meeting like October 20th. I would love to. But we need our cash flow borrowing
Yep.
prior. We need it now about October 15th.
Sure.
So, you know, it literally, like, we would have not enough money probably to do October 15th payroll.
Okay.
So,
All right, all in favor of setting next year's annual meeting for September 28th, 2020 at 6 p.m., please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next resolution for acquisition of real property.
Mr. Chairperson, may it be resolved that the East Troy Community School District may purchase real property, either land and/or buildings. I'll second.
Any discussion on that resolution? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And the last one, leasing of property.
Mr. Chairperson, may it be resolved that the East Troy Community School District may lease school sites, buildings, and equipment not needed for school purposes to any person for any lawful use at a reasonable rental.
Second.
Okay, discussion. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Is there any new business for the annual meeting? Okay. Need a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned for the annual meeting. We'll take a quick recess, then start the regular meeting.
exactly the same.
Do we?
Did?
That's weird. 2 weeks. 2 weeks.
2 minutes.
Huh.
Because I typed over last.
Yeah. You know, the only reason I said something is state law says you can't set an annual meeting except at an annual meeting, and if you had done that wrong, I'm like, I better.
Common sense.
Thank you. think you change all the dates yourself.
A few minutes. Yeah. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance again.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This meeting of the East Troy School District Board of Education and all other meetings of the board are open to the public in compliance with state statute. Notice of the meeting has been sent to the media and/or has been publicly posted in an attempt to make the citizens of the district aware of the time, place, and agenda of this meeting.
Make a motion to approve the agenda as posted.
I'll second that.
Any discussion on the agenda? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Make a motion to approve the minutes from August 26, 2019, the regular board meeting.
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor of approval of the board minutes from the last meeting, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That motion carries. Public participation. You all right, Jody? Good. Okay. Financial report.
At this time, I move the approval of August 2019 payments in the amount of $1,038,658.74 and receipts in the amount of $4,301,409.84 as reflected on the financial statements.
I will second that.
Okay, discussion, questions, comments, anything? Anything important, Kathy, to look at, or?
I'd say nothing out of the ordinary from what I wrote on page 7, so, and nothing, on page 7 is like drastic that you need to be aware of verbally either, but the key points are on page 7.
Any discussion?
I just want to know how narrow that road is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that a wheelchair bus doesn't fit down it.
Yeah.
All right, all in favor of approval of the financial report, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Financial report is approved. Discussion action items. First one is short-term borrowing.
I handed out to you because by Quarles and Brady Bond Council recommended practice, you get the bids the day of the board meeting, so not something that I can get you, Thursday to put in your documents. The bids were due at 10:30 this morning, and you can see we got 4 bids, which that was great. Last year we only got 2 bids, and it made me a little nervous last year. So pleasantly surprised to get 4 again, a little bit better competition. And the starred one down at the bottom, which is Baird in conjunction with BMO Harris Bank, was our winning bid for our, again, $2.9 million short-term borrowing, our cash flow needs. This will get us basically, again, like I stated, from about October 15th through taxes being collected January 20th. It's basically, again, what we utilize from point A to point B. Yes, there are some other revenues that come in, some December aid, some initial grant collections, so forth and so on. But this is the time of year where you're going to see in the financial report much larger outlays compared to receipts. So Baird was the winning bid, and we had budgeted $80,000 for the interest cost. Last year, the amount was $62,175. So this year, our net interest is $49,000. That is from September 30th till next year when it's paid off, September 17th. So it's a little less than a year, a couple weeks less than a year. When you put the amount into the budget, you have to do the amount from September 30th to June 30th, and plus the amount that was from this last year that we paid off. I want to say we paid off this year's like September 16th. So because of that like mixed year of interest, we made $24,611 compared to, again, what was in the budget. So as I'm doing for like Dr. Hittner and the administrative team reports about where are we in the budget as the budget goes on, like this is one of the positive variance items this year. We budgeted $80,000, and again, we are $24,600 less than that when you combine the two different interest rates and, you know, talk about what your actual outlay is going to be in interest this year. So that's good news. I always like it when basically the bids come in lower than what we had budgeted.
Just curious on how the effective rate and the net interest is calculated. I'm just looking at the interest rate and the premium. You'd think the lowest on both of them would be the least effective rate, but
Yeah, so basically they give you the premium. So it's the amount plus premium is then what you calculate the interest from. So because of the premiums, it lowers the effective rate. Does that make sense?
yeah.
Yeah, so when we, on September 30th, get the bond proceeds, we won't get 2.9 million, we'll get 2,906,786 is what we get in the bank.
So you just need a motion to approve theirs
Yep,
as the
so,
low bidder.
on page 34, if you don't mind, sometimes they get a little picky with the verbiage on this one. So on page 34, where it says resolution, if you could read those words, that would be great.
I make a motion pursuant to section 67.12(8)(a)(1) Wisconsin statutes, authorizing temporary borrowing for the East Troy Community School District, the aggregate principal amount not to exceed $2,900,000.
I'll second.
Okay, discussion or questions on that motion?
Just out of curiosity, where do we park these funds until we use them?
So we are using them almost instantly.
Okay.
But I was just looking at that today, and I have 3 liquid bank accounts. I have BMO, I have Citizens Bank of Mukwonago. I always mess those up. Citizens Bank of Mukwonago, and then LGIP, local government. It's like the state bank.
Okay.
And right now, my best interest rate is from BMO.
Okay.
So I directed these funds towards BMO, but we have to withdraw it from BMO as we're doing payroll, as we're doing accounts payable every week. So basically, we transfer from whatever, again, source has the lowest interest rate to Citizens Bank of Mukwonago as we need the funds. So we'll park it in whichever one is giving us the largest interest rate, and then we will draw upon it to do our transactions through Citizens Bank of Mukwonago.
Do we know roughly what we're getting on BMO at this point?
Yes, it's gone down, it's over 2% still.
Okay.
Trying to remember again what the high was. We do a spreadsheet with all 3. It's down from where it was about 6 months ago, but 6 6 months ago, about was our high. I want to say our high was about 2.7.
Okay.
I'd have to look at the sheet.
That's still a pretty favorable rate, all things
Still a
considered.
pretty favorable rate. Our lowest rate right now is at LGIP, and that's where our aids are directed. Anytime we're doing a grant claim, anytime we're getting state aid for pupil aid, any money from the state, we have that account. And again, it has fluctuated over the years. LGIP sometimes is the largest one, so.
Okay. Thank you, Kathy.
Any other questions? All in favor of approval of the resolution to authorize temporary borrowing, say aye. Aye. Aye, opposed? Motion carries.
Can I
Approve-
still interject one thing that I thought of? I am working with PMA right now to see if the environment's favorable to do something similar to like what we did with the referendum dollars, which they would be through WISCNet, a diversifying agent. And I said it has to be liquid. I don't have money to put away for 6 months or 9 months. Again, we're using it from that October to January time period. But he said with the higher interest rates, we can possibly be looking at maybe, again, a diversification into a variety of different liquid bank accounts. So something that we're analyzing. I'm also analyzing a line of credit to see if that might be better in the future rather than a little short-term borrowing. I looked at it about 6-7 years ago, and it wasn't any more cost-effective. It was the reverse. It was worse for us than the short-term borrowing, but again, it doesn't hurt to look at it again and see if things have changed.
All right, next item, approval of donations.
Is it just the one on page 35 for the
That
donation?
is all I know about it.
$250 from his classic book clubs. James Patterson's classic book clubs are giving $250 to our classroom library. Is that correct? Kelly Reed?
Kelly Reed. So 7th grade ELA. I think this is amazing. It's showing 124,000 applicants.
Yeah, that is impressive. 124,000. That's unbelievable. Yeah, that is. Yeah. So congratulations and thank you to Kelly for her application.
Make a motion to accept the donation.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the generous donation.
I'll second.
All right, discussion? All in favor of the donation of $250, please say aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you to Kelly for applying
Yes,
for it.
definitely. All right, overnight field trips.
Stace?
There should be in your packet. They're all from FFA, so there should be 5 of them in there.
There's quite a few.
So just note that they're spread out over time. They all have to do with the FFA organization or a leadership conference that FFA is tied to. So they're going to the National FFA Convention, or hope to again in October 30th through November 2nd. January 10th through 11th is a leadership conference just for 2 FFA members, and all the itineraries are included. In March, they're hoping to go up for 2 days, again for FFA, to develop their collaboration and communication skills. And then there's 2 for this summer as well. So there's 3 in the student and 2 for this following summer. So we asked.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thanks, Hazel. Let's get back up. 3.5.1, grading
Hey,
policy.
right there.
You should have the final copy. Just going to highlight what was changed. If you look on the front sheet, it says incomplete in medical. We still have that highlighted up to 10 days after the trimester grade period is in. There's medical documentation to do that, or that'll just stay on their transcript indicating that they were enrolled in that class for a period of time.
So you want what's in yellow to be striped?
Yes. Again, we did add the, or note the W that was added last year. We did add under the exemptions for classes that are not counted towards GPA. As that ECT prep course, we added that course this year. It's a very independent-based class. They create goals, they work independently with the curriculum through the school. But we do feel that it should not be counted towards the overall GPA. And then if you continue to go in the add draft policy, we've talked about this a number of times. So they're going to be able to draft the course up to 10 days into a trimester, and they're going to be able to add a course 5 days into a trimester. And then if you look under the academic excellence scholarship in our language, it did say they must, students that are transferring, it used to say 2 semesters before they could use those credits to compute into the formula, and then we just changed that to 1 year. So the length is the same, it's just the verbiage is different because we no longer have. That would be a recommendation for our final update, policy 345.
I'll make a motion to approve policy 345.1 on grading.
I'll second.
Any discussion?
For some of that stuff, like the classroom assistants or peer tutoring, though it's not counted in the GPA, would they be able to qualify for like community service hours or stuff like that?
I think it depends on the organization that you're talking about. So like, for example, National Honor Society, if they're earning credit, they would prefer that they not count those hours towards community service. So I think it depends on the lens that you're looking at community
Yeah, I
service.
was just looking at like you have the classroom assistant, peer tutor, technology integration squad. I wasn't sure about that.
Yeah, so they all students earn credit, it just isn't counted towards the GPA.
Okay.
But it would depend on the situation if they could help us.
Any other questions? All in favor of approval, say aye.
Hey.
Opposed? Motion carries. Staffing recommendations.
We do not have any of this, I do.
Referenda planning and discussion. Anybody like to start? Well, basically, we gotta come up, if we're gonna do something, it's gotta be put on an agenda for an action item. Probably the November meeting, possibly October, we could do it. Just to have further discussion. We'll be able to make a decision if we want to. Take it by April. So I guess the question is there any other information anybody needs, or direction that anybody would like to see we go?
Is everybody, thinking that the referendum is the right move? Is there anybody thinking not? Are we agreeing on doing a referendum? Or are we still on that discussion?
I can't hear you guys, I'm sorry.
I said, I think as far as I'm concerned, I'm in favor of it.
You're in favor of it?
I would tend to be in favor of it as well. I think the biggest issue with the referendum, given what it is, and given some of the factors in play, I think it's going to come down to community communication. Because this is one of those things, realistically, it's going to face an uphill battle unless people really understand why it's necessary. And these are not choices that are being forced on us because we've made wildly frivolous decisions with money. These are a part of the formula that we have no control over. So if we're going to go forward with it, and I would support that, I think we need to make sure that we have a strategy in place to educate. So.
Yeah, I tend to agree. Seems all the questions that the public have answers. It's just a matter of, can we get them the answers? Right.
Probably before the election.
Okay, and also, I think we're to that point where we don't have many options left to be able to foremost keep up with the districts that are around us, be able to track kids on these strike. I think we have to start focusing on getting to where we need to be. I think we're going to move forward. Just the question is now, how do we phrase it? What are we aiming for to get done? And at what amount?
Kathy, at this point, if we make the decision to move forward, then do we go back to the ad hoc committee for additional guidance, or has that run its course at this point?
Good question. I mean, you can. You can definitely. That's an option.
I felt like there was a lot of good feedback that came out of there. There were definitely opinions that changed during that discussion. And I think if nothing else, keying in on some of those people that maybe saw a change in their view, that are understanding why. Our job is not to convince, it's not to sell, but if we can understand what the education points were that help them to see things different, regardless of which way they go.
Yeah. That's a great point. Understand what the education points were that helped them. Yep. You know, we have the feedback that they gave us, like which possible questions would they be in favor of. One member, every time I send out the little blurb, like the board met, no decision yet, which was the last couple of meetings, he sends an email back saying, ask for what you need. And and I think that's the question, what do we want to say? Because a need, you know, whenever I open that up and read that, I go, well, we could use $40 million. So there's still what's the amount, you know, going back to the survey, it seems like we need to stay below $98. We need to stay below that $100 tax impact on a $100,000 home. So, you know, the administrative team has had quite a bit of discussion, and I think we've nailed in an option that I think we've come to the conclusions best, but I agree some dialogue with the ad hoc committee would be interesting.
I would tend to agree, it'd be better to get feedback. I think it'd be better also to come up with a simple question, okay, this is what we're thinking about, what's your thoughts on it, instead of asking for more opinions to come back, which I think is going to be all over. So,
Yeah, because we could do that with an email to them and see what their responses are, right? Pretty quickly,
hope so.
at least.
So like send an email to them and say, what do you think about this question? Is that what you're saying?
I guess once we
Email, or
figure
is
out
it
what
better
the
to get them
question is.
together in a room, and if they're willing to meet, and say, okay, we're planning on going down this path, here's what we're thinking, what's your feedback? I think it's better face-to-face feedback.
Here's
is
why,
sometimes
and
better
here's
than-
why we're thinking it.
Right.
So we can get that feedback.
Do we even go one step further and give them 2 or 3 different options and say, okay, sticking with that $98 number, if this is the question we go forward with, these are the items that we are specifically addressing, you know, do we talk about, I think we know what the dollar number is. one of the questions I heard a couple times in the ad hoc committee was, do we go with a 2 or 3 year referendum number, or do we go with something a little bit longer term, with a little more flexibility, again, maybe tying any future increases to rate of inflation, or I don't even know if that's necessarily legal. I don't know what the state would allow us to do, but again, it costs money to go to referendum. And if this is a structural, systematic problem, it doesn't make sense to bring that up. I understand where they're making hesitancy, but
Yeah, a few options might get
But
the
you-
feedback from them.
yeah, I don't think we don't want to go up with too much, because it would be very easy to inundate. But I think, again, if we come up with a couple of things that we think are responsible and viable, if they come back and say, hey, look, you're asking for 98, and we think 128 is the number, we can always come back and open that up for discussion. I don't think that's going to happen, probably. But, well, and asking the question is, we've got time now to ask the question and solicit good feedback, and there may be points brought up with those folks that we haven't thought about.
Sure. And also probably the questions revolve around either maintenance, either we're gonna go based on this or based on more operating. There's options there also, along with the dollar amount.
Are we comfortable with a number at this time?
I think I'm comfortable with the under 100, wherever that number comes out.
Over 70, but like we have a good target.
I mean, if we know that we're for doing the referendum, we kind of establish that, and if we can establish a number, that would give us at least some stuff to go off, going to for further advice and stuff.
All right, so let me be so bold. Do you have a sample question? Because I think what I'm hearing, if I've got you correct, is the number will be under 100, and once we get, again, all those final pieces of like the October 15th, we'll know better what that amount is as we do the next year's projections. But, so the number's not an issue, so you're more crafting what the question should be. So do you have maybe 1 or 2 or 3 options that then what we're saying is we would go to the ad hoc committee, we would say, okay, we're kicking around these 3 different ways to phrase the referendum. I could front load them and send it to them ahead of time so they can think about it. And then I would say, come to the meeting on October 10th, I'm just making up a date, with your thoughts on those 3 approaches.
Because I think it's, as Bob stated, I think it's really viable that they have to see a resolution or 2 in front of them with the dollar amount and the focus, just the initial preliminary focus for them to say, so how does that work, right? I think that's what they wanted coming into that ad hoc, then, like, okay, so show us now how that works. If you were to get that approval of a $98 tax impact per 100,000, you're putting it towards, I'm just talking maintenance, what does that look like to us? Like, show us, what does that look like? What does that do to help over here on the operational side for you then? And what will still be your challenges, even with that, right?
And what if we threw out different time periods, say a 98 for 3 year, or say 98 recurring?
Yeah, I agree.
Different options that way.
I think that's a good dialogue. I agree.
Definitely support that, because it would be really nice to see which way, because they may be more in support of a $98 recurring than a $98 rate. The vice president.
And certainly if we have the recurring in place, we don't have to go to, if we get out 3 years, 4 years, and something fundamentally changes, which
You don't have to
could
use
happen,
it.
we don't have to use it.
Right.
And I don't think anybody here would have to have their arm twisted too hard if financial circumstances change to not use it. But it gives us the ability then to stop planning. One of the first things I remember when we talked about having a 10-year plan in the district and having the fact that we almost had to scrap it simply because you can't plan out that far. It would certainly be nice, and I think it would allow Bob and his team to be much more proactive
Yeah.
with comfort, knowing that we had a little bit more stability, so.
And it allows it, to be honest, a community member to know the stability. In all fairness, it allows the stability, a community member to know the stability of the impact, instead of going, what would it look like 3 years from now again?
Okay, so we have the amount pretty much not in question, if I'm hearing right, under 100. I have, we should ask recurring, non-recurring, 2-year, 5 years, so we should ask time period. Okay, so that leaves us to the what. What should the question be for? For example, like, should it be for maintenance? Should it be for operating costs in general? Should it be for some sort of improvement that otherwise isn't being budgeted for, like science labs? What was the other thing on the list?
Safety and security
Safety
in
and
middle
security,
school.
taking that, so more of a capital remodeling project that wouldn't otherwise be done. Those were
It
some
could
of
be
the
maintenance
ideas.
and improvement.
Yeah, I would think,
Could
to
be.
me, it's a combination. It's not one or.
If it's the recurring, you could pretty much use it for anything, correct? Or
Yes.
is that you have to be specific?
In the resolution, you
You could make it very
could
general.
say it's just operational. I would state that I think that causes many more questions when you just say it's in general operational, because that means so much to an operation. So people are going to want to know, where are those dollars going to each and every time? Where I think Bob laid out pretty clearly at the last board meeting, the next 5 years of capital projects that are already on docket that probably need to be addressed. They cannot be addressed within the regular budget by any means. And then projects 5 to 10 years out. So we clearly have 10 years of capital projects that are outside of a budget that need to be addressed. So I think by putting some of those maintenance projects in there, and to me, and please, I'm just giving my advice, I think those are things that when you go out and we speak about communication are easily understood. When we talk about communication, we can present the current budgets, we can present the capital needs, and I think people understand that, and they see that, and you're aligning it up, right? And so they understand exactly what it's going toward to, and then when you have improvements in there, and that improvements can adjust over time, but right now, based upon the survey, you have told us when we're able to work it within our dollars, that we would address the improvements of middle school science labs, middle school security, but we also, everyone will need to understand, under the amount that we would be going toward that we think is favorable due to the fact of the survey, less than $100 tax impact, we will not be able to do all maintenance and those things immediately. It will be a prioritization list. And by, in one, I'm going to be frank, in one, by addressing, saying, well, what about the other operational issues in the district besides those areas? I think by addressing those areas, if that's what people are understanding and supporting and knowing, and we're able to communicate that clearly, by all means, that'll assist us in other operations outside of those dollars, right? I mean, then it will allow Bob to project and address those capital needs, and then we can utilize our own general funds more toward helping out with some of the other issues. By no means, though, I think every board member would agree with me on this, by no means the dollar amount that's being right now highly considered based upon the survey and feedback addresses everything and does not cause us to have to possibly face other ongoing challenges unless major changes were to happen at the state level in regards to additional funding. I mean, it just won't.
So that type of question makes sense to me, saying maintenance and improvements at this point.
You say maintenance,
Maintenance
security, and
is-
operations.
Not operations. as well.
Just improvements because it would go under that.
Right.
Maintenance and
Maintenance.
capital improvements type?
school science labs we talked about for years and years and years.
You want to put security in there?
And some security, just pushing
I think
the middle
that's-
school is.
Just so people know what you mean, Tony?
Yeah, I think
because
security is.
what they understand the improvement is.
An important thing for that middle school.
Yeah, I would agree.
Okay, so one possibility is testing the question for maintenance / capital improvements / security.
And the other one is really operating across the board, which to me I think is tough. Like you just mentioned, tough to sell because it is so wide open. There's no limits to it.
Well, and if you recall, the one we had last January was a blend of the two. It was supposed to offset the revenue cap gap by 50% approximately. And then the other half, and I slowly convinced myself that it's just a complicated message. That the time to explain that, the time to try to help people understand, I don't know if it's worth it. I just think it just muddies the whole explanation, it muddies the message, so. I think your direction of one or the other is probably better than something that tries to address both, is what I'm trying to say.
I would agree.
And I would say this, I would hope that the components on maintenance and any other capital projects that we were to invest in, if this were to come to fruition, would be also looked at as a cost avoidance in time due to the fact of obviously what we would be investing in, you know, as Bob has always shared and shown, you know, through the updates and obviously the electrical even and lighting in Little Prairie compared to middle school, which are similar square footages, and the amounts that we save because of the obviously updated newer technology and LED lighting. Well, that's a cost avoidance in the end. So hopefully it would benefit us and open up other savings for other measures.
Which is something else to communicate when we're
Yes.
talking about maintenance.
You bet.
And we have data to show it now, like compared to schools, which is
Yeah.
nice.
So something that you said, Ted, though bothers me a little bit. You said, like, you're not comfortable with the operating direction. So I don't want to put something out there as an option to the committee and then not have you guys comfortable with that option, though. That's where I'm going. Like, I don't want to test that and
that's a good
have
point.
you not like that. Because if they come back and you're like, yay, let's go operations, you know, that's always danger.
That's a good point. That you want to make sure everyone here is comfortable with what's being tested.
From my standpoint, I think in talking to a lot of people around the community, I think that's just a very tough one to get the message across on.
I would agree. So if we go more specific with
More
this.
specific, like maintenance, security upgrades, possible science labs upgrades in the middle school, but really leave the decision more, okay, occurring, not occurring. If it is not occurring, is it 2-year, 3-year, 4-year, 5-year? And the dollar amount to actually get to that maintenance, I guess is still, under 100 is leaves a lot open. Is that $10 or is that $90?
Sure.
So I think the ad hoc committee could help with narrow that down. Now that we have something, where at the beginning it was wide open.
And if we go back and show them what Bob's estimating for different impacts in each of the next 10 years outside of the budget, may help them to understand, maybe based upon what you would like to address too, where that number should fall.
Okay. So what if I send everybody on the committee an email? And I say the board is tentatively considering I won't say tentatively, I would say they are considering a referendum for April. That would be maintenance, capital improvements, and security. The dollar amount is not yet set, but they're thinking under $100. And also not yet set is whether it should be recurring, non-recurring, you know, and if non-recurring, how many years. And so they have a background this? What would your reactions be? Can we meet back together as a group in a week? Give them a week to think about it. And if they can't make the meeting, I'd still like your feedback via email. That's sort of, but we'd like to talk to you basically face to face and see what suggestions you have, what comments you have.
And then we'll bring that information back to the board in the October board meeting.
Right. That work?
That'd be great.
Kathy, on a recurring referendum like that, does it make any sense? Not that I think we're going to see a huge shift in Madison in the funding formula, but I'm trying to think of, there will be people that will have concerns about a mechanism that doesn't have a set termination, and justifiably so. Is there a way we could even build in a caveat to a recurring request for funds that said something along the lines of, if we were to return to a different sort of funding system? Because again, if we go back to 2010, 2011, if we are working under that sort of funding mechanism, we're in a fundamentally different economic situation. And I don't want to make it any more convoluted than we need to, and certainly we can sit up here and say, well, if that happened, we wouldn't request the money because we wouldn't need it. But I guess I'm thinking about people that don't necessarily have as much confidence. Does that make any sense
To
to
make
even entertain?
sense, I can definitely ask the attorney, the bond counsel, it's the same bond counsel we do the short-term borrowing with, so know her
Okay.
well, I can call her up and see. I can't say that I've heard of anything being done like that in the past, and I think she'll probably tell me you just have to rely on your communications
Okay.
message, but I can certainly ask and see what she says.
My biggest concern is that it could get too messy to communicate, and people may not understand it, but
Yep. Is that something that has to be built into the question, the caveat?
what's that?
The caveat needs to be built into the question,
Well,
or is it just built into the information and how?
I think Bob's saying
we
would they
spend
feel
it?
more comfortable if it could be put into a question.
yeah, so if we go to taxpayers and say, hey, we're gonna request a recurring referendum currently equal to $98, but with the caveat that if we get out 3 years, and whether it's the current administration or a new administration in the future, if they fundamentally change the way public schools in Wisconsin are funded to the point where we are, back closer to a level where we were in 2010, 2011, maybe at that point, there's 1 more year and then it terminates. Our ability to go out and request those funds terminates because we no longer need it. Now, again, like I said, I think that with the 5 of us sitting here, we would all understand that if we had more revenues coming from Madison, we wouldn't need to ask for more. We wouldn't need to rely on this. But I also understand people that say, well, if you can ask for tax money, you're going to ask for it. I understand that too, so.
I think probably more realistic than probably at the state level, because I think we'd have to go back a lot farther than 2010, 2011 for a percentage of what we would need from the historical standpoint.
Okay.
Right. But I think a big factor that could impact that ultimately would be if our enrollment began to change. Now, with staffing you would need, right? There's a need to every enrollment increase, but you don't always need that need immediately based upon class sizes, programming, everything. But I think it would be the enrollment that ultimately, if we could see that, and especially over 3-year averages, have a greater increase in the time, that may begin to impact what we would need out of that 1.4.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Okay, got enough information for now?
I do, thank you.
Yeah, I think you guys' ideas are really good. I like going back.
Okay, reports. Nobody still has any? All right. We'll move into policy review and development.
So can I just,
Oh.
I didn't have anything, but then I thought I should say that September is Suicide Prevention Month, so we put out some signs in a couple places around town about that, so you might notice those. And then October is Bullying Prevention Month, so every year we have a kickoff for that.
So I want to pass this out. It's just a first reading. I want to get your guys' thoughts, feedback a little bit. Currently, we do provide like a senior citizen lifetime pass. I do want to note it for the record. It's obviously only for home athletic events. We can't provide a pass. It's allows them to get into the other Rock Valley. But it's an athletic pass, strictly an athletic pass. And two, it's more upon a request right now. So how many people really know about it? How many people take advantage of it? And to be quite frank, still a protocol, a practice toward that is really open. As when I started inquiring about this, I said senior citizen can mean a lot of things. I can use senior citizen as I put in the memo to you guys. Senior citizens, might mean 65 to one person, might be 62 to another, could be 55 to another. So it's very open, and it's never really been, it's not defined because we don't have a policy, right? So I'm like, well, then who really determines that? How does one get it? Is it, and all that. So I'm not trying to make things more complicated by means. Actually, on the contrary, what I want to do is I want to recognize our senior citizens and provide them a lifetime pass. But I thought there should be discussion on, what does the pass go toward? Should it just only be an athletic pass, or should it be a pass toward all events within the school district? I know there's pros and cons maybe to that, but should there be discussions on it? Because I personally would like to have our senior citizens have the opportunity to attend as many events as possible. And I also know some of our senior citizens are on a fixed income. So I would love to have dialogue and create a policy that maybe would recognize allowing our senior citizens a lifetime pass that would allow them to attend school events, not just athletic events, right? And obviously that could not include away events or WIA events or any of those type of things. But getting that, so I'd like to have some feedback on that. I know I need to discuss this, and just so you're all aware, I've discussed it with a small amount of people. I need to discuss this with other various groups that would be affected to get their feedback and to know what they think. So I will take that out to them too, just so you know. The other thing is, I want people to understand, this is us as a district complimenting and recognizing our senior citizens to assist them and to help them. So as I put down below, just a few things, and these were things taken from other districts that I've seen who have been trying to implement policies like this, but we could put something of requirements for the senior citizen complimentary pass via the East Troy School District. It could be for anyone age 60 or older, or anyone age 55 or older that's retired from full-time employment. So if you're still employed and you're 60 or older, have a lifetime pass still. If you're 55, but you're not full-time employment, have a lifetime pass. And then we definitely don't want to be getting into a checks and balance or anything like this, but just, something that would let them fill it out so we could provide them this pass, and they could mark on there whether or not they're a resident of the East Troy School District, or if not, explain their relationship to the East Troy Community School District. Due to the fact what was brought back to me by one group when I was bringing this forth, and I thought it was a great point, was they're like, we probably should just limit it maybe to East Troy residents, because there could be grandparents that were a part of East Troy Community School District, but now they're living in Florida for a few months. They're somewhere else, but yet they have a relationship to East Troy, and maybe they're coming back for that minimal time. And do we want to provide them due to the fact of their relationship and connection to East Troy? And that's a viable thing as long as they're meeting the other requirements, right? So this is something. It's only a first reading. Wanted to get your feedback a little bit. If you're totally uncomfortable with that, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I think there's merits to it, but there's probably certain things that need to be flushed out a little. I do know of other districts, not all, but some that are doing it, and that's what caught my attention because I really like the idea. The other thing that it was is we already provide a lifetime athletic pass, but it's pretty open. I mean, there's no policy. We haven't even defined senior citizen. So I guess it's just anybody showing up saying, hey, I'm a senior citizen. I don't know what that means, but okay, here's a lifetime pass.
So someone handed it to them though, right? Like someone gave out the pass?
Yeah, we would, I believe probably Reed in the athletic department would hand it out.
So what is our current lifetime athletic pass? What is that? I know it's for the.
Athletic, to come to any athletic event,
So
any
that's-
home athletic.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, I don't see a harm. I guess how would you handle things? I'm thinking more like the last okay, you can come to this musical event, if you can't come to this one,
Right.
and.
And that would
be
need
laid
to
out.
be, that's right.
And my concern, having spent more than a few Friday, Saturday, and Sundays in this room for musicals and plays, that's about 50% of the audience. And I guess I'd want to see what the budget looks like, because I think anything we do to get more people here to enjoy what's going on is a huge plus. However, I would be concerned about there are people that show up to 2 or 3 of those presentations, and if all of a sudden that chair is being occupied 3 times, that's $25 that doesn't go to the drama department, so.
I agree, and that's the complexity.
Yeah.
But isn't it the same, isn't every sporting event the same fundraiser? Paying to
Sporting
get-
events are revenues.
Paying to
It's a
get
revenue.
into every
You bet.
sporting event.
Exactly.
What's
Sporting
the
events are
difference
revenues.
Between that and a band?
Yeah.
I'm not trying to downplay either one, I think.
Yeah.
We have to be consistent, because it's a volleyball game, you're paying $5 a game for, a jazz concert, you're paying $25.
Yeah, and that's kind of another thing that I was bringing up is, right now we're providing it on the athletic side.
Is it free?
You know,
On the athletic side?
There's like a $30 or $40 charge for senior pass.
but that's not what I wasn't told of any charge. I don't know, maybe there is, but it wasn't in my emails.
We have a senior pass.
We do have a senior pass, and nothing in the emails from me said that there was a charge. I didn't ask though either.
A couple more years, you'll have your own.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, especially if it's 55.
No, yeah, stop it.
Do you see that, Kat?
I have a fees charge. Let me look up those charges.
I mean, obviously we got the fees charged for the fitness center and everything, but yeah, I never asked, but nothing was brought to my attention about a fee for the lifetime.
Good information for the second reading.
Yeah, we'll look at it too.
Yeah, look at that, yeah. Fitness center, would that play into it also, or?
Right now, yeah.
That might not be a terrible thing to have a cost so that even, like a senior discount on.
So if you vote yes in the referendum and you're over 60, you get a free pass.
There are, I would be,
A little quid pro quo.
and about and about adult sports. Great idea.
Well, Kathy just said there's adult sports passes, which I did know about adult, but
Per
those are,
season
that's
or
not for a
entire
lifetime.
year.
Oh, for, yeah, season or entire year.
Right. not a
But
lifetime.
there's, you don't see one for a lifetime, though, like we were talking about, yeah. So you see, I just like, so I think there's still lifetime passes being given out, but there's not, you know, and maybe we do a certain fee for that, but it's a lifetime.
Yeah, something,
You know,
So this was allowing them to get it for free, right?
which, the proposal right now, or we're talking?
The one
Yeah.
that they're giving out.
Yeah.
We'll just do a discount.
Either per season
Yeah.
or-
Well, again, I think we can do a lot of things. I'm just looking honestly for consistency.
yeah, right across.
I want consistency and something that recognizes. I think we can balance that.
Yeah.
Consistency is kind of important.
So let's just, I think I know the answer to this, but just so I'm clear. If somebody comes to the football game, pays for their ticket, where do those revenues flow?
Yeah.
There's an admissions line item, and it's between about 25,000 and 30,000.
Okay.
It's one of the other, like in the pie chart, it's the other category.
Another
fees, fines.
27.
Okay,
So, yeah, it's your general revenues.
okay.
And you guys, please know that I absolutely understand what you're saying about the other events. That those are the, when I commented about I need to talk to other groups. I mean, I get it. Those are absolutely, I know that these are funds for people, so we have to balance it.
So the adult all sports pass gains one adult admission to all fall, winter, and spring sports home games during the current school year, and it's $60.
But that's not, again, related to senior citizens, it's just an
No,
adult
it's
sport.
just an easy way to get past,
Yeah.
buy it at each game.
What if we did
Yeah,
a
it's a good deal.
lifetime pass for all the things, but it was a discount on the Jazz Fest? Instead of $25, maybe the seniors has to pay $50. You know.
Well, and like the issue for Last Blast is those all go to, that goes to music boosters, don't they?
Right, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So,
It's better than break. It's the fun.
And like the drama goes to the drama club,
Why does the sports money go in the general?
because the sports are funded out of the general fund. So all the cost of the coaches, officials, that's also out of the general fund.
Which is why I think some districts do just stick to athletics when they're talking about this basketball. Because it is just related right to the general budget.
yeah, because my concern is like, we couldn't go back to music boosters, mandate to them, hey,
No.
you do last
That's
blast,
right.
you've got to knock off $5.
That's exactly.
Yeah, so,
Playing here for the drama club.
Yeah,
Same thing.
That's true.
yep. I'll work. I just
Okay.
wanted to bring it. Sorry about creating.
No, that's fine.
no, I mean,
It's a
again,
policy, don't hold
anything that brings in more intergenerational activity
That's
is
it.
a huge plus.
Unintended consequences.
Yeah, right.
So,
All right, thanks you guys.
All right. Next one, first reading of 551 leaves policy.
Yeah, this is the one you told me to have good luck with. So, on page 78, the part is highlighted that we've come up with to add to. So we're under subsection 3, the personal leave. We've always had A and B and B1. And we added B1 about, I don't know, a few years ago, which talks about should the staff member still like to request leave on an in-service day immediately before or after vacation, non-paid working day, or during the first or last weeks of school year, such days will be docked. But now, because of different issues we talked about, and we talked about the last time, we said, could we possibly assist with supporting our staff to allow a possibility of consideration for other exemptions? So where we went with that is, could we add 2 as our first draft proposal, and that is an exception to subsection 3B1, which is right above, related to dock day and consideration of the dock day being waived could be determined by the district administrator or his or her designee. Now, I didn't want to just leave it at that, because I don't want to just on my level. But how can we provide some guidance and assistance and balance our concern about the need of understanding those days of in-service are very important to our district, but also not allowing it to be just by pure chance on what day did they need this. Oh, and it fell on a day in which we didn't have in-service, but they had a work day, right? And I don't want to leave it to chance. I think that's ridiculous. So what we did is, on A and B, A, to be considered, the conflict can only be during the in-service week of August. So we limit that. Must be for immediate family, and only one day would be possible for approval under this provision, possible. So they would have, it's only going to be for one day. It's not for like weeks on end being gone, and it's only be considered possible even. And for it to be even considered after that, they would have to do the following in B. The request must be in writing at least 10 days in advance of the date requested. Necessary documentation that verifies the date and time of the conflict, which I think the parentheses is very important here, which the employee is then representing no other dates and times could have been done to avoid the organizational conflict. Meaning it is on their onus, and they're saying by signing something that was legit. And I'm going to be honest, in fact, if it ever came forth later that there could have been another date and time when they could have attended to whatever it was, and they said this was the only time, that's not true, then we'll be dealing with it in a different manner. So I think there's a strong responsibility of saying they've looked and there's nothing else they can do. And then finally, and a solution to make up the time list. So that would be involved in the letter. 10 days prior for even consideration, not necessary documentation, and then a solution to make up that time. Only for one day, if it were to even be considered, and it still has to be for an immediate family. And in this subsection, guys, is only for the August in-service. So if somebody were to come up and say, I want to use subsection 3.2 A and B for any other time in the school year, we're going to say no. It was only for the August in-service week. That you're going to have to do either a personal day or a dock day. That doesn't apply any other time during the year. We actually feel it kind of meets the need.
yeah,
It's pretty general, but it's good.
I think it has to be. Yeah. Or else it opens up a Pandora's box. But it allows at least a little flexibility. So if you have any suggestions, feel free to email me or anything. We'll bring this back for a second and a final. Okay?
Okay.
Okay, and the last policy is a 346 district assessment policy.
So that's the one that's all highlighted. Highlights are the new proposals and what has the strike through is being removed. So we really restructured this whole policy, and the reason for that is to align with policy 112, the personalized learning policy, because instruction and assessment are two equally important parts of the learning process. We felt that assessment had to address the personalized learning. So the policy is set up with the first portion talking about the philosophy of assessment in the district. We recognize there are assessments that we have to administer, the state assessments. We don't have we don't have choices revolving around that, but we do have choices with the classroom assessments that we use. So we talk about assessing what we value by empowering learners and creating personalized learning environments that build student confidence, motivation, self-worth, and purpose. Section 1 talks about the purpose of assessments. What are we actually using assessments for on a daily basis? So the information from assessments, we get information about academic growth and potential of each student, and that information is used to provide evidence of student proficiency and growth in relation to our standards and our learning targets. It's used to inform instruction. It's used to provide meaningful feedback as a tool for student reflection and student goal setting. It's used to monitor and report progress related to the student goals. It's used to develop assessment-capable learners, which are individuals who take feedback, set goals, monitor their progress. And it's used to identify the strengths and weaknesses of our curricular and our instructional program. Section 2, that was originally the district assessment coordinator's role. We feel that that would be better in a job description, because essentially we just had a job description embedded within this policy, and we're just trying to talk about assessment and not the job description. So we changed that to assessment practices that as a district we promote or believe in. So the district promotes flexible assessment practices and tools that may include but are not limited to. And you'll see a variety at the bottom. So student-created assessments, performance assessments, student portfolios, individual and group projects, constructed response, and teacher observations. We're trying to communicate the fact that assessments don't have to be a paper and pencil 10. They can be an application of skills in a performance-based mode or method. And then, sure.
One of the big things that we're believing is occurring, and that we're not only seeing through conferences and getting feedback on, but through our dialogue with our staff and everything, and through some of the information we get on standardized tests, to be frank, and that is we need to move from surface level learning to deeper and transferable learning. And to do that means we've got to get more into application and being able to apply it to other contexts rather than just the core content in which we're in. And so to do that means we need to adjust some of our assessment practices too.
Yeah, we're trying to move away from the just recall or regurgitation of facts to the application, because quite honestly, in our world, memorization really isn't necessary anymore. I mean, we all have tools that we can go to find out facts and information, but the fact of the matter, yes, are we able to apply that information to the world around us? So that's where that comes from. And on the flip side, we talk about the use of the assessment continuum, which is attached as Exhibit 1. So this continuum was created last year, and it's a continuum that acknowledges that our teachers are growing too. So the idea of the continuum is we start at curriculum centered. Our goal is to move to learner empowered. So every year teachers are creating a goal around this continuum in an effort to move to learner empowered in several areas of assessment, including summative assessments, formative assessments, feedback, and goal setting. And so we're invested in the use of this assessment continuum because it provides an understanding of the indicators used to define a learner empowered environment. So teachers can go write down this list, parents, students, and identify what needs to be in place in order for the learning environment to be considered learner empowered, the student is at the center. We're also, giving a nod to, I think Chris talked about it in his annual meeting, State of the District. He talked about goal setting, that students need to be taught how to set goals and how to reflect. And so are our students learning from the assessments as much as our teachers are. And then we'd like to provide extended opportunities for students to demonstrate their learning. So understanding that, Chris referenced this too, if a student doesn't master an assessment the first time, does that mean we just move on and then those learning targets are never mastered and then we've created a gap? Or do we return to it with instruction and extend that time for an opportunity to learn? And then section 3 is just an acknowledgement of personalized learning plans that exist. So we have students with IEPs and 504 plans, and we have English language learners, and we recognize that assessments have to be tailored to be in alignment with those plans. And then section 4 is the same, it's just the non-discrimination statement.
And oftentimes, you guys know, obviously, policies, right? Which comes first, chicken or egg? Oftentimes, sometimes it's the policy that'll really push the practices. In this case, I like to say honestly, we've been discussing these and been working on that assessment continuum for the last few years, aligning it to our educator effectiveness and our leadership and our PPGs and everything else that we do. So in our professional development been supporting. So these have been things that have been ongoing for some time. So this time, I really believe it's our practices saying, look, we need a policy now to support our practices.
Looks good.
Okay. I'll bring it back next month.
All right. Communications announcements.
I am. I'll do it next time.
All right. Future items for the board. Anybody have anything?
I don't know if it's a future item, I have a question. Do we allow foreign exchange students to graduate?
We actually have taken care of that. There was an inquiry already by an individual, I won't mention the name, and I appreciate it coming forward, just inquiring about it. I brought it forth to Ms. Keene and Mr. Klinowski, and they did some research, talked to other districts and everything else. Up to this point in time, the recognition was done at the scholarship awards, but was not recognized at the graduation ceremony. But they were recognized, him or her, but always at the scholarship awards. After they had dialogue, they talked to some other fellow principals, they brought it back, we had dialogue, we conferred, and we will now be recognizing any foreign exchange student at the graduation ceremony with a certificate, not obviously a diploma because they've not met these strict requirements, but they will be getting a certificate.
Right, I just didn't know what the policy was.
Yeah, there is none.
Oh, okay.
That was all the reason why we needed to kind of consider it differently. But after that, we felt there didn't need to be a policy as much as a practice in place. So,
Thank you.
Stace, did I depict that correctly?
Perfect.
Okay.
As long as they're still here.
Yes.
Sometimes,
No, you're right.
Yeah.
You're right.
as long as they want to interview.
Yeah, and I really do want to say, like I say, I can't appreciate the individual who brought it to our attention. And it was very nicely stated, just, hey, inquiring. So people brought this up to me. I didn't know. Have you ever thought about this? And then I responded back and said, you know what? I have no idea. So I said, let me look into it. And then Stacy informed me of kind of the past practice, how it evolved, why we were doing it. Made total sense. And so then, to her and Kent's credit, I said, can you look into this? They ran with it, brought it back, and said, here's our recommendation.
Kath, do we know anything about Chester Burns being listed? Hate to be the
Yep.
broken record.
No.
Like, do you know what a record is?
Yeah, what is that?
They want to wait until the CSM is finalized, and it's at the village the week before our board meeting. I'll be at the planning commission meeting. So I think our board meeting off the top of my head might be October 24th. I think the village's planning commission meeting is the 17th. And then, so then it'll be 14th and 23rd. Yeah. I think they want to make sure there's no hiccups.
Okay. Any other future items? Anybody think of anything?
Do we have to put the referendum question on here to come back to it, or is that something that you just would put on? Just put it on.
a specific resolution would go to November agenda. So they can make a motion or action in October
Yep.
if they're comfortable with that. But then we would need to have probably a specific resolution in November.
Yes, yeah.
Agenda.
At some point, if you could direct us, okay, develop a resolution question, because, yeah, I don't want to proceed with the attorney
Yeah.
and get charged fees.
Because what you'd be doing in November is be off the attorney's verbiage.
Latest December.
Let's go.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, no.
We're just looking at it.
Need a motion to adjourn.
Yep. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll make a motion to adjourn for the evening.
Second.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
We're adjourned.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tracy.
Stay.